Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. Guess what, guys? 1 week.
7 days.
To Election Day. We are taking a look this morning at the top ads for each campaign where they are spending the most dollars, making their closing cases. Very interesting contrast in terms of what their theory of how to move voters in these final days is whatever. I don't know. My English language is really going well this morning. All right, we also are going to take a look at the bull case for Kamala. We've been looking at some negative indicators for her, some positive indicators for Trump. So today we wanted to flip the script, and there are a few pieces of news that fit nicely into that. So we're going to make that case. We also are going to take a look at how Trump is prepping Stop the Steal 2.0 and whether or not those efforts could be successful given that you have new legislation that's passed, given that he is no longer president of the United States. So we'll dig into the weeds with that so everybody knows what to expect were he to lose the race next week. Both camps out there playing for the Muslim vote, especially in the state of Michigan. Barack Obama making some interesting comments yesterday that comes on the heels of Trump securing some Muslim endorsements that he touted in that state, which of course is crucial. Elon is being sued over his big daily $1 million lottery by the Philly DA, and his organizing efforts on the ground have come under scrutiny to see whether or not they have been successful on the Trump campaign's behalf. We're also doing a little follow-up, just a quick follow-up on this whole Washington Post story. We added this yesterday when we found out that after Bezos decided that they were not going to endorse in this race, they have lost more than 200,000 subscribers. Yesterday, the number we were getting was 2,000.
Yeah.
Then NPR was able to report by yesterday midday, so it's undoubtedly more than this at this point, they had lost more than 200,000 subscribers. That is like 10% of their subscriber base. So they are bleeding subscribers at this point. Bezos himself felt the need to come out and publish an op-ed. I don't think it helped matters, so we'll bring you all of that. And then I have a monologue today. I'm taking a look at Trump's most important, potentially, moment on Joe Rogan, which went a little bit undernoticed given the whale psychologist discussion and then the whole Madison Square Garden situation, but something important that we should all take a look at.
There we go.
That's what's on tap.
Before we get to that, thank you to all of our premium subscribers. We're really excited 1 week to Election Day, breakingpoints.com. You can take advantage. We have a lot of fun stuff. We're literally running a bunch of tests today for election night. We've got an exclusive partnership with Logan Phillips with Decision Desk HQ. We are going to be a full-fledged newsroom on election night, which is really exciting. That's something that you guys have been asking for years, and we invested a lot into it. So if you want to sign up, support that, breakingpoints.com. We'll also have some subscriber benefits that you guys will be able to take advantage of on election night. So we're really excited. We got a whole week of coverage and all that planned. No matter what happens, we will be there, right there with you. So as Krystal said, let's start with the ads. And the ads give us a lot of insight into the dollar figures that are being spent and similarly what most people are hearing. I know a lot of people who watch this show and who are online, you guys are consuming a lot of stuff. But if you're just living your life in Pennsylvania and Arizona, in Wisconsin or others, this is most likely what you are going to see on your airwaves. So we're going to start with Kamala Harris and the two ads that have the most money behind them in the swing states. Let's take a listen.
Not of money, I know. 20 of you and you're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay you.
I am not rich as hell. I work hard. I scrape to get by. Donald Trump wants to give tax breaks to billionaires, but Kamala Harris has plans to help us. She's going to crack down on price gouging and cut taxes for working people like me. I voted for Donald Trump before, but this time I'm voting for Kamala.
I know 20 of you and you're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay.
I'm not rich as hell. I'm the one that really needs the break, not the people that are already rich and have the money. The 1% don't serve anybody but themselves. So for them to get a tax break, no, that's not cool. Kamala Harris is going to make billionaires pay their fair share, and she's going to cut taxes for working people like me. I'm Buddy, and I'm not rich as hell, and I'm voting for Kamala Harris.
FFPAC is responsible for the content of this ad.
So those were the two ads. They've got, what, $40-something million behind them now. You can clearly see that it's very focused on the rich as hell comment. I would note that that second ad, that resident, is from Allentown, Pennsylvania. I've come to know the region well. It's where my wife's family is from. Donald Trump will actually be there today because of it's a big swinging area. It also is the first test. It has one of the largest Puerto Rican populations in the state. And having been there, I can tell you there's yard signs everywhere for both both candidates. So in terms of the enthusiasm, they certainly take it seriously for who they're going to vote for. But it is certainly that last part is one that you're seeing quite a bit on the airwaves, specifically for Kamala Harris on that. And frankly, I was a little bit surprised because if you also, from my own experience, having been there, watched some Eagle game or Phillies game while there, it was a lot more abortion ads that I saw, but maybe things have changed in the last month or so on this tax and billionaire one. But look, it's not a bad strategy. Obviously, it's one that anybody who watches this show would be able to connect to and could understand why that would move swing voters. So it very much could be the thing that pushes over the edge.
Yeah, they're going for class war, and obviously I'm here for it. I've been seeing one in Virginia that is similar that says like, candidate A is for the billionaires, and actually even has a picture of Trump with Jeffrey Epstein and a bunch of other, which is kind of noteworthy. And then candidate B is for you is basically the idea. So very much in line with this. The first one we showed you also hit the note of like, listen, I voted for Trump in the past. This time I'm going with Kamala Harris. So one thing that's noteworthy to me is while a lot of what is, what the speeches are about, Kamala's coming out and doing this speech on the ellipse. Is that today? That might be today, actually. But she's giving that big closing speech on the ellipse that's supposed to be about like democracy and those larger threats. They're talking a lot about the comments from John Kelly saying, hey, I serve with this guy and he is a fascist to the core. While they're doing that, in terms of the sort of national media messaging, what they're actually putting paid, like what they're running paid ads on, is this much more class economic focused message. And, some of the polling indicates that this has helped to move voters so that she has at the very least narrowed the gap with Trump on the economy. Some polls show that she is actually exceeding him or has matched him with regard to who people feel will be better for the economy. Every poll I've seen shows voters giving her an edge on who would be better for the middle class. That's obviously the message they're driving here. So, in general, I think it's pretty smart strategy.
Yeah, and then for Trump, clearly, and I've been talking about this, it's immigration all day long. And we're going to get to issues and what people say is their top. I honestly kind of don't believe them anymore. I've gotten to that just because of the way that the dollar figures are being spent on various different things, and also in terms of what's moving the needle. Could be wrong, though. Kamala certainly does win. So here are two of the biggest ads with money behind Donald Trump. Let's take a listen.
As San Francisco DA, liberal Kamala Harris let killers go free. And as California Attorney General, Kamala continued to put criminals first. After a little girl was raped and buried alive, laws were passed to keep sex offenders away from children. Kamala ignored Jessica's law and allowed convicted sex offenders to live near schools and parks. Kamala Harris has always put criminals first. Don't make America her next victim. Make America Great Again, Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
He murdered a father of 3, sentenced to life in prison. Kamala Harris pushed to use tax dollars to pay for his sex change.
I made sure that they changed the policy so that every transgender inmate would have access.
It sounds insane because it is insane. Kamala was the first to help pay for a prisoner's sex change.
The power that I had, I used it in a way that was about pushing for the movement, frankly, and the agenda.
Kamala's agenda is they, them, not you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
That last one I heard over and over again when I was there in Pennsylvania. But look, I think it's clearly that they have some different theories about what is going to move people. And actually, can we put A6 up on the screen? Because this is really what it all comes down to. What do people mean when they say certain things are their top issues? So here is from Pew Research. This came out last month. The economy is the top issues for voters in 2024. Number 1 is the economy amongst Harris and Trump supporters and all voters at 81%. Number 2 is healthcare at 65. 3 is Supreme Court. 4, foreign policy. 5, violent crime. 6, immigration. But the thing is, how can you look at those ads that are being run and say that this comports with that? And specifically in terms of what switches it. Like if healthcare is truly number 2, I don't see a single person talking about healthcare. In terms of that concepts of a plan answer from Trump, which obviously was like ridiculous, but then you would assume if that was so devastating that the Harris campaign would be pumping it into every swing state living room. They seem to believe that they can compete, as you said, on this better for for the middle class question. A lot of people still do trust Trump on the economy. The spread is not the way that it used to be, but it's pretty clear that immigration is that number one. Now, the other theory is that if you do look at the spread between immigration and between immigration for Democrats and Republicans, immigration is the number 2 issue for Republicans, right? And then violent crime is what, I think number 3, just eyeballing it there. So if that's true, then the other way we could read it is that Trump's ads are all about driving his base and making sure that turnout is as high as possible. Whereas with Kamala, obviously they have abortion, which is one of their top issues. But for them, it says, what, if I'm reading it correctly, healthcare, Supreme Court are their top issues. I don't hear a lot of that coming out of them. So maybe theirs is more of a swing state strategy, and they're just banking on these voters who are already committed Dems on abortion to come out and vote. But either way, none of this 100% like aligns with the ads that we've seen, Krystal.
Yeah, I mean, it's culture war versus class war in terms of the closing messages that they are making on the airwaves. And I don't think that it's necessarily surprising, given the way that Trump has run campaigns in the past, that his is a base turnout strategy.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of why you see the Madison Square Garden rally and letting their freak flag fly, very different from how you would normally position yourself for a general election. And, you know, we'll see. I've seen some polling that suggested that the ad attacking Kamala Harris on transgender issues in particular has been very ineffective, in that many voters couldn't even recall that they'd seen it, in spite of the fact that it's blanketed the airwaves. And then, you know, on the Harris side, I think you're right that they're looking more at, that's part of why having the Republican there saying, I used to be with Trump, now I'm with Kamala. They're really trying to go at that sort of moderate swing voter. They're in the mode of still trying to persuade some of those swing voters that they think are gettable for them potentially in the suburbs. And so that's the direction that they're ultimately going in. You know, based on the polling research that we've seen, what Matt Karp shared with us from the Center for Working Class Politics about the messages that work best, especially in the swing state of Pennsylvania. You know, they found that the basically class war, the strong populist message, polled best in terms of moving voters. The second was progressive economics that, you know, moved voters. And then way down the list was the threat to democracy message. So, you know, it seems like the Harris people are seeing that, and at least in terms of their paid communications, are responding accordingly. And, you know, I guess one of the big questions is how much paid communications move anybody. At this point, you know, but even if it's marginal, the tens of millions of dollars that are blanketing the airwaves, you have to think that it accounts for something. The last thing I'll say about the Trump campaign strategy, which we've mentioned before, is these ads are not just about those specific issues. They're also about painting a portrait of Kamala Harris as having these weird extreme ideas. And it's noteworthy to me too, in terms of the different strategies. This was something we saw in the dollar figures previously. The Democratic campaign is doing some straight negative, but most of their ad dollars, and that's what we saw in the 2 ads that we ran for you, are a contrast, right? They're about, here's a positive for Kamala Harris in contrast to a negative for Donald Trump. The Trump campaign is leaning heavily into just negatives, not building up Trump, not a contrast, but let's try to dirty up Kamala Harris. Let's make you question whether she's really the person that you want there as commander-in-chief. And probably that has to do, you know, partly with just a different philosophy about what moves voters, and also the fact that she does have a higher approval rating than him. So they probably feel like they need to bring her back down to earth a bit.
That's what I was saying. I mean, for Trump, everybody on earth at this point knows how they feel about Donald Trump, positively or negatively. I don't think building him up is going to change all of that. But the last part I would really get to is this theory of paid communications versus earned media. And I'm just a firm believer that earned media and the national media environment is just so much more important, even putting earned aside. So for example, Kamala may be dumping, how much is it, 40 million behind those 2 ads, I think we just said. But I mean, the truth is that the majority of her media coverage in the last 2 weeks has been almost all Liz Cheney democracy focused. That was what her event in, I think it was in Malvern, Pennsylvania, one of the wealthiest suburbs of the Philadelphia main line with Liz Cheney, was all about. Similar in Michigan, her at her event, I think today, is about democracy, the fascism. I mean, this has become like basically mainstream if you look on CNN or any elsewhere in terms of what the majority discussion is all about like Donald Trump is a fascist and all that. I mean, look, again, I could be 2016 rose-colored glasses, but it's all been tried before. And if anything, I mean, it's the least original argument in the book. Trump is going to be a fascist. Trump is going to be a dictator. The other side of it would be exactly what I just said about Donald Trump. This is a base turnout strategy. Democrats hate Trump. You know, I'm walking around my neighborhood, which is 90-something% for Biden. Dictatorship bad signs are everywhere. Stop Project 20. I mean, this is the beating heart of true blue. But, I mean, these people are fired up. They're ready to vote. And I saw somebody say that Democrats seem more enthusiastic than they have been since a campaign of Barack Obama. Obviously, Barack Obama won twice, right? So that's not a bad thing to be at. But some of the turnout data doesn't necessarily comport with that. We're going to do a segment soon about early vote. It actually is not looking terrible for Kamala, but I have seen the warning signs. I think it's in Milwaukee, for example. Black turnout is like a 40-year low. There's a little bit differing signs in Georgia, but low black turnout would not be what happened with Barack Obama. So, of course, you know, we can look in every different direction. What we're all just trying to do here is just show people this is what swing state voters are more likely to see, but they're also very likely to consume a lot of national media through the ether, not through watching CNN or elsewhere, through online, through clips, through this show, any other podcast that people listen to. And I'm just generally going to bet on the latter for what people are really going to hear.
I think probably for Democrats, the messaging about fascism and the danger, the sort of existential danger that Donald Trump poses to the country, that's probably about bringing their own voters home.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And there has been some signs of that, by the way. For example, there was a poll, an NAACP poll of black men in particular, and they had polled them before, and it showed black men shifting back towards Kamala Harris, her winning, especially among young black men, her winning black men in this particular poll overall at the same rates as Joe Biden. So I do think some of the messaging, the sort of earned media messaging from the Harris campaign and the speech she's giving, et cetera, is about kind of bringing people who typically vote Democratic, who are maybe disgusted with the Biden policy, potentially on the war in Gaza, trying to bring them back home, I think is probably some of the strategy there. And then, you know, I mean, Trump doesn't do himself any favors with having this Madison Square Garden rally where he's calling, where his warm-up act is calling Puerto Rico an island of garbage and making all kinds of other, you know, offensive comments throughout the night, not just from the comedian. And Nate Silver had a write-up of whether or not he thought that would make a difference, move the needle. Could put that up in the screen. He thinks it could be. And the reason is he looks at, in particular, the Google search traffic for Trump. And it has spiked after the Madison Square Garden rally. Now, maybe you think that's a positive because, hey, Trump's, you know, dominating the narrative, blah, blah, blah. But I think more this is feeding a Democratic narrative about reminding people of the negatives, the reasons they soured on Donald Trump before. And his approval rating had, especially post-assassination, assassination attempt, had creeped up and kind of stayed there. So there is room for him, for those negatives to creep back up. So in that sense, I don't really agree with, I know it's a common analysis, and I understand where it comes from, that like none of these scandals really stick to him. But he does historically have like a low approval rating. He did lose in 2020. His party did poorly in both 2018 and surprisingly in 2022. So, you know, I don't know that it's totally accurate. There is no doubt he can get away with things that would be total career enders for virtually any other politician. But the idea it has no impact at all, I don't really buy that, because we have seen how his approval rating has been consistently negative, in part because of these sorts of situations.
As usual, the case can be overstated in both directions. I would put it, what you just said, is that in general, these things don't tend to stick. In 2020, you lose by some 40,000 votes across 3 states. It's not exactly an overwhelming mandate by Joe Biden. And if we consider—
I mean, he won the popular vote by 4.5 percentage points.
Right, but that doesn't matter.
And he won all the critical battleground states. So yeah, it depends on how you look at it.
Georgia, 10,000 in Arizona. I forget what the other, I think is Michigan.
Right, but I'm just saying, when you lose the popular vote by almost 5 percentage points, like that is a significant vote against you. And given the fact that now the gap has likely closed between the Electoral College and the popular vote, like, if he faced today a 4.5 point loss, it would be a landslide in terms of the battleground states all going to Kamala Harris as well.
Definitely, but that doesn't look like if that's going to be the case. I mean, if anything, what I think with Trump is a lot of this stuff is baked in, and ultimately what will swing these so-called swing independent voters. I mean, it's just difficult, I think, for anybody who does this for a living or has long-standing and well-held political beliefs to understand. It's just not how those people think. Maybe this will be enough to push them over the edge, but something that has been consistent with these swing and independent voters is the things that piss them off are not the things that may piss you off or any other like liberal commentator. Same vice versa, by the way, for anybody who's on the right. Somebody who's saying something verboten to us or ridiculous doesn't sound all that ridiculous whenever it goes to a swing voter. What actually moves them is almost impossible to determine. It's like alchemy. In terms of what the actual spotlight on Trump is going to see, one of the reasons my bias, and again, this is a bias, tells me that it's probably good for him, is that the more he's in control of the conversation, the better off that he is, as it has been in the past for his approval ratings. Now, the question is about whether things have shifted enough from 2022 onward for people to take this very, very seriously in the way that they did then that they didn't, let's say, in 2016. And same with Republican voters. Now, the Republican voter data would have to comport with the idea that there is some long-held revulsion with Trump, but it hasn't happened. Like, if the Liz Cheney Democratic theory of Trump is so bad that he's turning people off were true, you would see higher percentage of Republicans not wanting to vote for him. But I mean, in the New York Times Siena poll, Trump is actually doing better with Republicans than Kamala is doing with Democrats. Now we're talking about 2 and 4 points, okay? So let's not overstate the case either direction. But my point is, you would want that number to be 10%. Now the other theory is anybody who's still pissed off by Trump, they're not Democrat, or they're not Republicans anymore.
Yeah.
They left the party a long time ago.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you roll the tape, I kind of predicted that in 2020. I was totally wrong. I thought that there actually would be, some sort of pushback or whatever. But, by and large, it hasn't been the case. People reconcile themselves to Trump. I think the Biden presidency has not been good. And so based on that, a lot of people are willing to just come home and have a negative polarization and partisanship. I genuinely have no clue. We will obviously find out on Election Day. But everybody who thinks that these are enders for Trump, I mean, how many times does the old Donnie need to wriggle his way out for us to learn, a different lesson in terms of what people actually see when they see this man? It's almost certainly not what most people who commentate on this for a living is.
I just think that analysis is very 2016, when he's been consistently losing since then. And so 2 things are different. I mean, the major thing that's different is that he himself is trying for a different coalition than he was in 2016. In 2016, it was all about, let me just juice the numbers with the white working class. And obviously in key swing states, that was enough. This time, they have seen erosion with white voters, especially white college-educated voters. So to try to make up for that, it's about going after, these less frequent black and brown, younger men in particular. And so, it's not the same group that you're going after. And I think the campaign realizes that there may be more sensitivity around some of these comments with their aspired to voting coalition than there was in the past. So, for example, the Trump campaign distanced themselves from the Tony Hinchcliffe joke about Puerto Rico being an island of trash. Every single Republican, I think, in Florida immediately came. Marco Rubio, Rick Scott, all these different Republican members of Congress in Florida came out and condemned the comments. The head of the Republican Party in Puerto Rico condemned the comments. So, it's not just me, some lefty liberal commentator saying it. The Trump campaign clearly sees it as an issue as well.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, and frankly, I think that's kind of a stupid strategy. First of all, because it was literally at your rally, so there's no disowning it, number one. But number 2 is, again, if we really believe this theory of black and Latino voters, it's just incorrect if it's gonna push you over the finish line. Like, that's a tiny slice of the electorate. It's maybe 8% in the swing states, especially in the wider states across the blue wall. White voters is the whole ball game. Ironically, there are a lot of like very racist commentators who often throw this at Trump because they're like, hey man, why are you chasing the black vote? Whites are the only ones who actually matter for you. And look, you know, in weird horseshoe theory, I kind of agree with them just on a statistical basis that their whole like, you know, what was it, First Step Act and all this, it hasn't really done anything in terms of pushing people to come out and vote for Trump. Predominantly, I just read a study yesterday, a big part of the reason that the Latino shift has happened amongst Latino men specifically is based on literally Latinx verbiage and on an aversion to cultural liberalism. That has nothing to do with Trump or even like a Puerto Rico comment or whatever. It has to do much more with like cultural conservatism deep at heart, and also, frankly, a lot of these people are more working class and are not college educated and thus have a very different like cultural mode that they swim in as opposed to everybody else. So that seems to be, you know, the one reason it happened. And I guess there's a long way of saying is I don't think the Puerto Rico joke is gonna matter that much. I really don't. I mean, again, like, if somebody makes a joke about where you're from and that's literally enough for you to come out and vote for somebody else, to me that seems insane. But I mean, maybe, you know, all the Puerto Ricans in this country think differently than me. I don't know. I'd like to think I'm more like everybody else. It just seems to me that the reason why they would come out to vote is number one of this long-standing, like years-long aversion to cultural liberalism, as they said in that, I think it's an NBER study. We can maybe talk about it next week. But that's what the driver just seems to be behind a lot of this Black and Latino movement. But at the end of the day, you know, the ball game is still white working class voters, because all he needs to do, I believe, is turn out at 2016 levels or slightly above from 2020, and he could still win with no more increase in the Black or the Latino vote.
Yeah, I mean, and when a race is really, really close, like if it's as close in the swing states as it was last time, then you could look at any one community and say a little bit of erosion here, or a little bit of erosion there is what made the difference. I mean, Pennsylvania, there were like 500,000 people who are of Puerto Rican descent. And I have no special insights into that community, but I do know that it's been reported, like, you know, Spanish language talk radio is all over it. Bad Bunny has apparently moved elections in the past, and he's all over, like every basically Puerto Rican star is all over it. People are calling into radio stations locally in Philly and saying, I was thinking about Trump, but there is no way I'm gonna vote for that man. So, you know, can it make some difference on the margins? I think it's possible. I think it's possible. I don't want to oversell it, right? I don't want to say like, oh, this is the ball game, it's over for him. But when you tie that into not just the specific impact on like, you know, Puerto Ricans, but how it feeds into the Harris messaging about how this person is, what does she say? She says like unhinged, unstable, and the messaging about, you know, him being a danger and just someone you really don't want in a position of power. He gave them ammunition in the final week. And I think it's pretty clear from his campaign's reaction that they think it could be a problem for him. I just know if I was looking at, you know, how the Democrats were closing and there was some equivalent, you know, scandal on the Democratic side and all of their ad dollars were going to like, let me push out these niche culture war issue ads that really only appeal to the Democratic base, I would be like, this is preposterous that you're closing this way. And so, no, I don't think that the Trump campaign is closing well. That doesn't mean they're gonna lose, but you know, I don't think that they're putting their best foot forward, in my opinion, in this final week.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.